passionate about it, or I can start and venture into this crazy thing called happiness research, which I just felt would be really, really fun and really, really fascinating and rewarding. And then a couple of months after that thought occurred, I essentially just quit my job and started out with what I thought was a good idea and a bad laptop. And yeah, so now 8 years down the road, we're 10 people, and I think that's going to be the best decision that I'm going to make in my career, starting that place.
Fantastic. So just a technical moment. It looks like Facebook, unfortunately, is not working, but we are now streaming on YouTube. So if anyone is having any problems, I recommend checking out YouTube and sharing that link with anyone who's trying to participate with today's program.
And
so,
go ahead. Just major scientific breakthrough in happiness research. We found out IT trouble, not good for happiness.
Right?
This is a lab. We're doing an experiment. Yeah.
Yes. No, it's true, right? And I think that especially now, I think we're all a little bit more attuned to some of this awareness around mental health and happiness and technology. So I would love to hear a little bit from you about kind of COVID and how some of that has impacted some of your research and some maybe information about that.
Yeah, so when COVID first happened, we actually started a happiness survey. Maybe I need to rewind a little bit, because when we measure happiness, one of the things we do is we like to follow people over time. Because, I mean, Becky, you have one perception of what happiness is. I might have another one. So we follow people over time so we can bypass that. So my perception of happiness will remain constant throughout the survey. And we embarked on a survey back in March 2020, when COVID first hit Denmark. And we had around 4,000 people in our study and followed them throughout June with waves, I think, every few weeks. And to be honest, I don't think we actually needed 4,000 participants and big data to tell us that COVID was bad for happiness. People, became worried for their health, for the health of their loved ones. They became worried for, the job security and financial situations. So we saw happiness levels going down. And we're likely going to see the impact of Corona for some time to come. But I think it's also interesting to see what are people doing to sort of mitigate the negative effects of the situation we're in. And one of the things that has helped me a lot in these circumstances is sort of this sort of stoic sort of perception or stoic practice of distinguishing between the things I can control and the things I cannot control. So I cannot control a global pandemic, but I can control, what we're having or what we had for dinner tonight. So trying to focus on, what can I do that makes quality of life within the small space we have here in Copenhagen better. So that's what I try to do during these times.
Excellent. And I think that actually mirrors a lot of what the public library is doing as well, with some of the different programs and things that we're participating in. So we've actually had quite a number of cooking programs, instant pot cookbook clubs, you name it. So I'm just curious, do you have anything that you've been learning about through some of this COVID time for yourself with cooking?
I cook a lot. I've always enjoyed cooking a lot. But it's true, I've been doing it more these days during Corona, because it's just a way for us to get some good food on the table, and sort of indulge in a little bit of simple pleasures. I think before Corona, I had not done desserts a lot, much to my girlfriend's disappointment. But but during Corona, I've actually ventured into the dessert area as well, and one of my first attempts was, I think, what the French call tarte tatin, which is a basically upside down apple pie. So chop up some apples, a lot of butter, a lot of sugar on the pan, and get the apples in there. And then you put on puff pastry on top of that, put it in the oven, I think 225 degrees Celsius, I'm not sure what that is in Fahrenheit, for 25 minutes. And out the oven you go, and then basically happiness is served. So yeah, I've been doing more desserts than usual.
That's fantastic. So we do have a couple of questions from customers, so I want to be sure to include some of that. So first question, are you aware of the secret society of happy people? And the secret is in parentheses, so I don't
know. No. And I mean, if I was, would I say so? So
I don't know. It's a mystery to me. So we'll have to do some research, like the good librarians we are.
But I guess I should be included in that. I think it was a British newspaper called The Times that at one point called me probably the world's happiest man. But I just want to underline, some days and some days not. Things go, or we have good days and we have bad days. Fortunately, I get to see a lot of good days and have positive emotions and a strong sense of purpose in life. But I also have bad days like everybody else. That's part of the human experience.
Yeah, I think that's real because it's human, right? So what are some of the different ways that we can make choices around our happiness? Are there any ways that maybe we can do more of the day-to-day kind of happiness rituals, or what kind of approaches might you recommend, especially for folks who are trying to get started on some of their happiness journey, so to speak?
I would first actually tell them a little bit about how we define happiness. Because it's, as I mentioned earlier, it's one of the core tasks we have at the Happiness Research Institute. And happiness is tricky to measure and quantify because it's many different things. So it's a complex umbrella term. And what we need to do with those terms is we need to break them down and look at the different elements or the different ingredients they consist of. And that's something we do all the time. It's what we do when we talk about how the American economy is doing. We break that down into GDP per capita, growth, export, inflation, unemployment rate, interest, and so on. And that gives us a language to talk about how's the American economy doing. So that's also what we need to do with well-being, happiness, quality of life, to thrive, the good life. All of those terms, wide umbrella terms. So when we try to quantify happiness or well-being, we would look at least 3 different dimensions. So first of all, we would look at an overall life satisfaction. So how happy are we with life overall? Considering the worst possible life we could live, the best possible life we could live, where do we feel we stand on a scale from 0 to 10? Now that's actually the question that goes into the World Happiness Report that ranks the different countries. It's also a very stable answer people give us. People would probably answer the same to that question today as they did 2 months ago. So it takes a lot to move the needle on that one. The second dimension is called the affective dimension. And that has much more to do with what kind of emotions we experience on a daily basis, what kind of mood we are in. So we could ask people, yesterday, did you feel happy? Did you laugh? Did you feel inspired? Did you feel lonely? Did you feel stressed, worried, anxious, and so on? That's, of course, very volatile. We can see on that dimension, there is a weekend effect. People are happy on Fridays than they are on Mondays. Again, thank you, big data, for that nugget of wisdom. So that's very volatile. And of course, the two dimensions are linked, because if you have a lot of everydays with a lot of positive emotions, you're probably also more satisfied with life. But again, you can have a bad morning and still feel happy about your life overall. The third dimension we always cover has to do with a sense of purpose and meaning in life. So that builds on Aristotle's perception of the good life, and to him the good life was the meaningful life. So we call that the eudaimonic dimension, because that's the ancient Greek word for happiness that Aristotle used. So those three dimensions is what we try to quantify when we measure happiness. So when you ask that question, Becky, what would you recommend? What would you focus on? I think we first need to understand, what are we trying to accomplish here? Because different factors will have different impact on these different dimensions of happiness. So, for example, having kids have a tremendously positive impact on our sense of purpose and meaning in life, the third dimension. For the second dimension, what kind of emotions we experience on a daily basis, they're probably going to have mixed results, because we're going to have extremely positive emotions, but we're also going to be worried and anxious and more stressed. And in terms of life satisfaction, it very much also depends on where we are in the world, and what kind of circumstances we have as a family. But I think, interestingly, one factor that seems to impact all three dimensions is our relationships. So having good relationships with our loved ones, families, friends, neighbors, a sense of community, that has a positive impact on a sense of purpose, on the emotions we experience on a daily basis, and life satisfaction. So that one ticks all the boxes. But again, a lot of factors impact the different dimensions. Some things, again, as we talked about earlier, we are in control over, and some things we're not in control over. So for instance, we can see when it comes to life satisfaction, the first dimension, our age seems to play a part there. There is a sort of a U-shape curve throughout our life when we look at life satisfaction, meaning that we're happiest or more satisfied with life when we're younger. Then it goes downhill. I'm heading rapidly downhill these years, because globally the low point for happiness is 44, and then it goes up again until our 70s and 80s. So some things we cannot control that actually impacts happiness. But I think if we look at life satisfaction, and if we look at emotions and the sense of purpose in life, I think the best universal tip is something built around what we in Denmark call the ABC for mental health. So ABC stands for act, belong, or doing something active, and doing something where you belong, and do something where you commit. So do something active, do something together with other people, and do something meaningful. Doing something together with other people is, of course, tricky these days. But for example, in the fall here in Copenhagen, a group of friends and I, we went to a forest north of Copenhagen for one Sunday afternoon. So we could be outside in a forest. So we had the social distance we needed. We could be active. We were together, and we were looking for edible mushrooms. So that ticked all the three sort of boxes in terms of active, together, and something meaningful. So trying to find activities like that that either tick one or three of the boxes, I think is very, very good. And personally, I've also found a lot of joy and comfort in noticing which activities are free and gives me enjoyment, and try to see where do we decouple well-being and wealth, because I think that it's tremendously important as societies, but also as individuals, that we understand that money is no guarantee for happiness, and we can find happiness without a large sum of money. And we can talk about how money matters for happiness, but yeah.
Well, the mushrooms definitely connect with me. I did a bit of foraging during the quarantine when we were in lockdown, and I adored it. We even had morels growing in the front yard, which was just amazing. So yeah, I'm a big fan of foraging for mental health and connection and all the good things. So a couple.
And
go ahead.
And speaking of the dessert, because you reminded me with the morels. So during summer, we picked a lot of wild cherries where we spent summer, and we cooked it for Christmas. So there's a Danish tradition. The dessert for Christmas is it's basically rice with whipped cream. It sounds horrible. It's not. And then on top of that, there's a warm cherry sauce, and we use the cherries from summer for that. So and that just sort of brought the smell of summer and cherries to the entire house. So that was nice.
That's lovely. Well, we'll have to look up the recipe so that we can try this cherry dessert. So a couple more questions from the customers. So a little bit, you mentioned this, but about the happiness expectations and how it kind of changes country by country. Can you speak a little bit more to that, kind of the country by country piece?
Yes, well, there's several things in it. So when we look at the World Happiness Report and the country ranking, there is usually 156 countries included in the World Happiness Report, which is focusing on the one dimension, the life satisfaction or the overall happiness. Usually the US will be 16th, 18th place, which is fairly good out of 156 countries. Usually we'll see the 5 Nordic countries in the top 10. So Denmark, Finland, Sweden, Norway, Iceland, together with the Netherlands, New Zealand, Australia, Switzerland usually occupies the top 10. But if you look at the entire spectrum of countries, we can see that 6 factors explain the majority of difference between these countries. So GDP per capita. So yes, money does matter when it comes to national well-being. Richer countries are on average happier. There's a lot of variance between them, and some poorer countries are richer or are happier than richer countries. But as a group, yes, richer countries are happier. We can also see healthy life expectancy matters, freedom to make life choices, freedom from corruption, so good governance, generosity in society, and social support. So do we have somebody we can rely on in times of need? Those 6 factors explain the majority of national differences in well-being. But the question was also in terms of expectations. So some studies will have not just the question, how satisfied are you with life now, but how satisfied with life do you expect to be 5 years from now? And there we see almost universally, most people expect to be happier 5 years from now than they are today, which is great. There is a large sense of optimism. And I think that's also what drives us forward as a human race. We're optimistic, and we are sort of seeking for new opportunities. But it can also be a challenge to think that we will always be happier tomorrow or 5 years from now than we are now. Also because we know that there is something called the Hedonic Treadmill. At least that's a term in happiness research, which means that we seem to constantly raise the bar for what we feel we need in order to be happy. So we might strive for a job, and then we get that job, and then there is a higher title, or there's a corner office, or there is a bigger pay, and we have a lot of goals, and that's perhaps great because we run towards something and we need purpose and meaning in life. But sometimes we're lucky enough to achieve those goals, and then we feel happy for a while, but then we set a new goal. And I think that's important to be mindful of, that there's no one accomplishment that's going to make us forever happy. That we seem to have this ingrown in us as humans, that we crave new goals and accomplishments. So expectations is tricky in that way.
Yes, it is tricky.
But I mean, it's also why I really like happiness research. And first of all, it's great that we get so many people here tonight that are interested in happiness research, and that's also what I experience. Now we meet, but I have conversations also with people in China and Mexico and Canada and Cape Town, and so it is also what unites us as humans. We are interested in happiness. We're all in pursuit of happiness, and it's this wonderful complex term that we can look at from many different aspects. Now we talk about country differences, or what expectations matter. We talked about recipes, and we talked about age, and there's so many different ways to look at this phenomenon, and that's also why I enjoy working with it so much.
So speaking of age, I have to ask this one. I'm going to read it because it's so good. Okay, so my daughter Daphne is 10 years old. She's interested in design and functionality, and rearranges her room every 4 months or so. In her room, she has a bed, a desk, a sewing table, and a terrarium for her leopard gecko. I didn't make that up. There's a lot of floor space and a cozy corner. Her question is, what would you suggest to make a tween-teen room more Hygge? And I know I mispronounced that, so you'll have to forgive me. So tell us how to pronounce it, and then maybe give us some ideas about teens and tweens and design, anything related to that for that 10-year-old.
Very good. So I think your pronunciation is really good. So maybe we should just say, for those people that are not familiar with Hygge, it's been called many things. So it's been called sort of the art of creating a nice atmosphere. It's been called cocoa by candlelight. It's a reason why I have the candle behind me as well. It's basically everyday happiness, trying to find happiness in simple pleasures. It's spending an afternoon on the couch with your loved ones with some treats and a good cup of coffee. That's what Hygge is. And that happens everywhere. It happens in the US, it happens in Russia, it happens in Denmark, it happens throughout the world. What was uniquely Danish was we had a word that described that situation and that activity and that sense of comfort and connection and togetherness. Now it's a global word. I think the only unique Danish thing left is the false perception that us Danes have that we have a monopoly on Hygge. So Danes will think Hygge is a part of the cultural DNA, the same way that freedom is perhaps part of the sort of US perception of your country DNA. But it's a global phenomenon. I really like the question, and yeah, and I'm actually researching around that right now, because I've become increasingly interested in how the built environment impact how we feel. And I'm sure a lot of you also experience this. We are impacted emotionally by the place we are in. that is becoming more and more evident. We also know, we did a study on this a couple of years ago at the Happiness Research Institute, where we surveyed, I think, 14,000 people in 10 different European countries, and could see that around 15% of our overall life satisfaction is connected with our homes. So the more satisfied we are with our homes, the more likely it is that we're satisfied with our lives. And the question is then, how to create that cozy, warm atmosphere that we're thriving. And I think, what was the name of the
Daphne?
Daphne. I think Daphne is already doing a great job. I think it sounds like it. If not, if she's not already doing it, I would perhaps say the first step is considering the lighting in the room. So for Danes, a Hygge lighting would be something with a warm, soft temperature. Now I have a ring light, so you can see me because it's dark in Copenhagen. So this is a white, harsh light. But this one, if this was the only light we had in the room, I would look very different. I would be sort of in sort of semi-darkness. But this is a warmer, softer, redder light that gives us off a different atmosphere. And of course, it doesn't have to be a real light. You can have, or a real candle. You can have sort of light bulbs that give off a different lights. And actually, there is a Danish school that have now done some experiments with lighting in the classrooms. So in a lot of schools, they have this sort of uniform white lighting from the ceiling, which means that every part of the classroom is equally lit. And in a school in Aarhus, which is the second largest town in Denmark, still small, but second largest town, they have created some experiments where they have installed lamps. So I'm not sure what the English term is. In Danish, they are called pendler. So they hang down closer to the table. So they're not up in the ceiling, but they are closer to the table, and they create a sort of a pocket of lights. So you will have focused light on the table, and then there'll be sort of more dimly light away from the table and in the corners. And they've done an experiment where they see before and after effect on the noise levels of the kids in the classroom, and can see a significant reduction. Because beforehand, one kid, he was just lying, rolling on the floor because he could be everywhere because the light was the same in every room. But with the change of the light, with the change of the lamps in the room, the kids now come to the table and sort of have a different attitude, a different atmosphere. So focusing on trying to play a little bit, perhaps with different lamps or different colors in terms of light bulbs could perhaps be a first step for Daphne.
Thank you. Someone had said that it might be called a pendant lamp or light.
Pendant.
Yeah. So.
Pendant. Thank you. So.
No, this
again,
is fun.
Second language.
Something else for me to research later. I do want to share that we do have your books in our collection. We also have them in Spanish. So for anyone who's interested in, we have a growing Spanish population in our community. So we're trying to have more of our world languages collection. So I was delighted to see that we have your books in Spanish, and we'll share the link to that for our catalog in the chat for anyone who's interested. It's also our library's 100th birthday. So happy birthday to Anna
Congratulations.
Public Library. Thank you. So as part of that, we're doing a little bit about library stories. And I was curious if you had a library story, or if libraries have been part of the happiness research. I hope they have. That's my bias. But I know that reading is certainly part of some of your book. I do have this one. This is my personal copy. A big Big fan. So I would just love to hear about reading and libraries and any library story if you have one.
I have a lot. So, I mean, libraries is where I learned to read. It's a big part of my childhood memories. The library that was in Haderslev, which was the town I grew up in. And actually, when I researched my third book, which was The Art of Making Memories, I did a lot of sort of walks down memory lane. And I, of course, visited my childhood library in my hometown. It was just interesting, the smell when I walked into that building, it just instantly transported me back in time. Read all the cartoons, and then ventured into more grown-up stuff. So I associate. My first association is that's how I learned to read. Libraries have come up again and again in happiness research or in my work. So in several of my books, I've mentioned sort of the power of libraries, or how people use books as basically free therapy. And actually, if you go back in time and visited, 4,000 years ago, the ancient library in Thebes in Egypt, above the library door would say, welcome to a place of healing. And I think that's coming back these years, that people are understanding how books can help in terms of times of need, how reading about other people, either nonfiction or fiction, that are going through some of the same things we as individuals are going through, has a healing power. And lately I've been looking a lot at a book called The Poetry Pharmacy, which is a collection of poetry that helps people that are going through different challenges that humans are going through, loneliness, heartbreak, sorrow, and it's compiled by a Brit who was, of course, a lover of poetry, but also just saw the effect of people being introduced to poetry that mimicked it or sort of reflected some of their emotions they're going through. And one of his points is that if you read a poem that was written by a Persian guy 700 years ago, who's elegantly writing and expressing what you're feeling right now, perhaps loneliness, that will make that sense of loneliness seem smaller, because you're not alone with that, and that's a common human experience. So I think that's really, really interesting. And also, in terms of libraries, after I wrote the little book of Hygge, I ended that book with asking people to start documenting where they see things we should be grateful for that is happening in the world. And that there is a hashtag look for Hygge on Instagram, and thousands of people have uploaded different photos on that. And a lot of them are of libraries, either public libraries or mini libraries that people have created in their communities. So libraries pop up again and again in my own sort of happiness journey, but also in happiness research. So well done, and congratulations.
Well, that confirms everything I've ever experienced of libraries. So good job, you. Well, in poetry too. I mean, I certainly can speak to the power that poetry has had for my own healing journey. Nikki Giovanni, Rumi, so many amazing poets. And I think that it's also something that helps us to connect,
Right.
which, to go back to what you were sharing about relationships and how we connect. So I do know that we have quite a number of questions, so I want to make sure I get a couple of these in. So the first, I am I don't speak German, so I'm going to butcher this word, but it says, is the concept of Hygge similar to...
Gemütlichkeit.
Yes, good job, you. All right, so what is that? And tell us more.
Yes, so I would say it's one of those words that comes closest to Hygge, the German Gemütlichkeit, and the Dutch in the Netherlands, Gezelligheid. So I think that the main difference between the German and the Dutch term and the Danish term is, I think Hygge is a little bit more introverted. Where, as I understand, Gemütlichkeit, for instance, it could be a sort of a large Oktoberfest, beers and lots of people and lots of sort of social interaction. Where I think Hygge is perhaps more a smaller group of people or smaller number of people. And there was actually one. I taught at a university in Copenhagen pre-COVID, and at one point we were talking about Hygge with this group of international students, and there was an American girl who said that Hygge for her was sort of socializing for introverts. It was a way of being together with other people without this being sort of a high-powered networking super mingle event, which I thought was really, really well spotted. So I think that's the main difference between Gemütlichkeit and Hygge, but there's a lot of similarities, definitely. So
why are... No, go ahead.
So you said you would butcher German, now I butcher English.
We don't mind. So why are the Nordic countries always at the top? What's the secret? What do we need to be doing differently so that, 5 years down the road, maybe it's the US up there?
It's not a competition. I mean, we can all be happy. It's I think that's one of the great things about happiness. My happiness does not diminish your opportunity to be. So overall, it's those 6 factors we talked about before: the healthy life expectancy, generosity, social support. But for the Nordic countries, I think it's also important to understand that the ranking is based on a national average. So you can say the Nordic countries are the happiest in the world. You can also turn it around and say perhaps they're the least unhappy. Because I think Denmark, Sweden, Norway, Finland, Iceland, I think we're quite good at reducing causes for unhappiness. So there is generous unemployment benefits. There is universal health care. There is free university education. And it means a lot of the worries that people have usually are sort of taken care of. I think that lifts the bottom, that increases the average, and that's why these countries often come out. That's part of it. It has a lot to do with equality as well. Of course, there's inequality in the Nordic countries as well, but perhaps less than in the US. I think also that to some extent, the Nordic countries are somewhat successful in removing the price tag that can be on happiness. Whether you are rich or poor, you will still be able to enjoy a relatively high level of quality of life. And I think it comes down to things like that: equality, lack or sort of a reduction of worries, but I think also a high level of trust towards each other, a focus on cooperation, not competition. So different elements. The weather, not so much. So, but those other factors, I think, are perhaps some of the explanations.
Well, considering we're about to have a snow day tomorrow,
and of course the cherry rice pudding dessert for Christmas
doesn't hurt, right?
Yeah, you're having a snow day tomorrow.
It's going to happen, I think. Yeah, the library will be Our Anne Arundel County Public Library will be closed tomorrow for inclement weather, unfortunately. Yeah, but that means that my son will get to play in the snow, so happiness for me. Well, I really appreciate you taking the time to answer our questions and to give us more insight into the happiness research. I know there are many questions that will continue to come in. We will try to get some of that information shared through our website and other resources. And we're really excited for having this opportunity. It's just been wonderful to have this conversation, and we're very excited for everyone to participate today. And we'd love to hear what folks think about this program. We do have a survey. We'll put the little link in the chat. So if you have any other questions or input, and if you have ideas about more programs that we should have similar to this, or if you have friends that you want to send our way, feel free. We will all be happier together. So thank you, and happy snow day, except it's not snowing where you are. That's all right.
Thank you all for joining.
Thank you. Have a good evening, everyone. Hope it is full of hygge. And thank you to the Anne Arundel County Public Library Foundation for helping to fund this event. Right. Okay.
Becky and Mike, thank you both. I'm going to go ahead and end the webinar on this end. This was so much fun. I got to sit in the background and watch, and I very much enjoyed it. So thank you.
I enjoyed it very much too.
Delightful.
Thank you so much. Maybe if there were questions I didn't get to answer, maybe you could send them, and maybe we could answer some if you send something out.
Yeah, we can certainly try. Yeah, we will do our best. Thanks again, and I'll be in touch about all the other stuff.
Excellent. Thank you, Michelle, and thank you, Becky. That was super well done.
Oh, it was so much fun. I could keep talking for like days. So this was great.